Mike, revenue streams 2020, there was a lot of optimism going into this year about the growth of online streaming income, that sort of thing. It seems like that is going to continue to grow in 2020, but it's not going to make up for the touring income. What are you looking at as far as revenue streams are concerned for the rest of this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's doubling down on what works that isn't touring related. I mean, for a successful touring artist, touring revenue along with VIP and merchandise is probably a minimum of 50% of their business. For some of them, probably skews more 70-75%. So you're talking about a magnificent chunk. If you are, taking things that are supposed to happen in April, May and moving them to September, October, not the end of the world. You're talking about, taking a band that was supposed to go from April through September and not being able to replace that in any capacity is a bit of a challenge there. So the things that we are doing is saying, okay, we can only control what we can control. Right now, the forecast is stuff has been moved, the stuff that was on sale. So let's just keep the mindset that it is moved till that time period and it's not canceled. And then what can we do? I mean, Ice Nine Kills is a robust online merchandise business. We're focusing on ways to continue to push that. We're actually investing money in trying to acquire new fans at this point through all of the social platforms. With the idea that we can then hopefully encourage them to, do something, preferably paid, but at the very least, just kind of train them so when things do come back, they're ready to act. And then looking at, some newer opportunities. There's some things that have been in discussion that are potentially money generating that we now have the ability to really dive in, discuss with the artists, make sure that they're on board, because so many of the things that you're talking about, are in the artist's hands. As Eric said, we can lead the horse to water, but we can't make him drink. But we can train him, we can show him what it looks like to drink in terms of other artists that it's worked for and sort of take them step by step through that process. So it's not an all or nothing thing. So, if things stay as they're looking, I think for a certain tier of artists, it's a really exciting time. Of which Ice Nine Kills is surely one of them. For some of the smaller artists, it's got to be a challenge. These are people that I've managed tons of developing artists, and it was a challenge to begin with. Tours aren't even profitable sometimes. So they're going to figure it out. People are resourceful. And look, if $4 gas prices didn't kill developing artists, I'll be in shock if coronavirus does.
It killed my wife's SUV, that's for sure.
So Blasco, are you doubling down on what works, what Mike said, or are you looking at new fan acquisition? What's your balance?
Well, like I said, I mean, we're just riding out the storm. I think our pivot was to go and make records that will come out early next year that we can then ride that wave of, like, we all have new records coming out, so we're on the top of a new record cycle. That's sort of where we put our efforts into. And I think if we're just to add on the way out is if we're talking to unsigned musicians, trying to inspire them, I would think that the smart way to use this time is to really kind of look at what you've got and give it a real reread. Give it a real rewrite, give it some attention to detail, because you've got the time now. Are your songs the greatest? Is your art the best it can be? You've got a lot of people sitting around right now, whether it's a mix engineer, band guys, musicians, artists, all looking for work. So I think now would be a really good time to spend on fine tuning, because, the reality is we're not going to come out of this just like it never happened. Like, in terms of a band being able to book a show for any of these guys to get on a plane and go see them is going to be much harder to do. And there is going to be a bottleneck. And in terms of budgets, in terms of anyone getting signed, there's probably going to be a little bit of a lag before that happens. So I think really smart way to spend your time right now is just to reevaluate all your, your brand, and your presentation, and really kind of fine tune it, take a look around and do the best that you can, so that whenever we come out of this, you can really come out swinging, with, a fresh sort of outlook and a fresher look, so that, you'll be more appealing to it all. And maybe you can be in front of the pack a little bit.
I love that idea about, perhaps I'm putting a word in your mouth, but seeking out collaboration a little bit from other people that will help you make your presentation better.
Yeah, no, I mean, because like I said, it's like, it's smart to spend this time really putting your brand under a microscope and reevaluating. And then what better time now than to collaborate and invest in your brand, than whenever there's a bunch of people that are sitting around that could really use the work. So that's my suggestion.
Carl, can you throw in some ideas, things that you would suggest to artists who are looking to get your attention in the next few months?
Honestly, I wish I had something creative to say. I'm doing right now the same thing I normally do. I mean, honestly, most of the bands that I find are either bands that I've already been looking at, or guys that I have on the road, bands that are already on my label or that I manage, bands that they tour with, and they're like, dude, we just played with this band, they're fucking sick, you should check them out. I mean, that's been since the late 90s. That's been how I've been doing this. So yeah, it's harder this way. And one of the things that I've wanted to avoid was being a Spotify A&R guy, where I was like, oh, I like this band, and like, oh, other similar artists or fans like this too, and you listen to that, like I don't want to just do that, because obviously, that's not creative, and someone's already, if it's exciting online, someone's already beat you to it. So I'm not entirely sure what it's going to be right now. Like I'm staying in touch with all my clients and just talking about things and what they're doing. And honestly, I'm in a weird spot where I've got a handful of bands that either I was in the process of signing and I'm still trying to figure that out. I mean, legitimately, the one thing we haven't talked about is the casualties of this. Like, and maybe I'm in a more unique spot because on my record label side, I fund it myself. But like, I had a band 2 weeks ago being like, oh, we're supposed to start in the studio. And I was like, you know what, let's pump the brakes on that, because the tour that you were going to be on around the record release is now gone, and we don't know where that's going to be. And, and it's a smaller developing band where touring's been trickier to find for them. And this was a great tour, and now it's gone and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, well, our producer is really pushing us, to not burn him and stay in the studio. And I was like, well, fuck him, because honestly, everyone's getting burned right now, literally everyone. And, but I had to tell him, it was like, I'm looking at a significant, like, cut back in the revenue that I bring in, things like that. And it was like, all right, so if we can push this, let's do it. And we went back and forth, and we spoke a lot, and they were like, we really still want to, record the record now and roll the dice and see where it goes. And I was like, all right, let's do it. But, the band is taking some of it on their own to see. And that's kind of a weird spot that, obviously bigger artists aren't necessarily in, but smaller, really, really small bands, indie bands that are like maybe, doing a record that somebody like me is going to give them $5,000 to do or something like that, where I was like, all right, you know what? My web store is shut down. The warehouse won't ship, so no money there. And my management, all event-based revenue is gone until maybe September, October, something like that. So, so you start thinking of it like that. And I was like, I don't want to commit to anything where I'm going to burn somebody and not have them do work and not be able to pay them. So I'm being very upfront with them and that sort of thing. And in turn, I have to be upfront with my artists and be like, we might have to take a break, like take a second and see where we're going to be. And, that's kind of the reality of where things are at right now. And, I'm lucky enough, I'm in a position where my staff, I'm good to go. I'll make sure that they're paid through this whole thing. And that's cool. And that's the most important thing to me. But at the same time, releases are going to have to they're all going to get pushed, and we're going to have to kind of see where it goes. So I think I derailed that question, but
no, but you open up like a whole bunch of other new topics. Can I throw this to Eric? Eric, do you have any artists on Hopeless that are like that small to mid-size that you might have some fear that you're going to have trouble with their motivation, especially if they were on that same sort of trajectory that Carl was talking about to go in studio, about to release, getting all excited, and then nothing,
Yeah, I mean, look, I have that worry sometimes when we're not in a in a pandemic. There have been some smaller artists that were lined up to go, and we had an artist that sadly was just about to start their record and had to fly all the way back home to Australia. And that just comes up. How can we get back in the studio? How do we do it? Finding that availability. Yeah, it slowed things down a bit, but I think the way we're looking at it is that it's sort of, this is what it is. I can't change it. How do we get this back on track? And I think the conversation, are we losing momentum? Everybody's in the same position, right? So again, we go back to the only opportunity you really have right now, if you're not in the studio creating, is to, I think Blasco said it, like rewrite, look at the songs, have conversation with the new producer about what we're looking at. At the same time, double down on what you were doing prior. So I want to avoid any non-motivation, or people being unmotivated, I guess is the word I'm looking for, by just saying, look, okay, this isn't happening. Let's get the timeline reset as soon as we can, so there's no question mark, no gray area. And then let's do the things we can do, the things we can control during that time. So yeah, I have a couple artists that are in a not perfect situation. And I have a few that we were lining up, that are a little more singles-based artists that, this slows things down. But again, we just go back to what can we control, and let's focus on that until we can control this other thing. And that's really all we can do. And I wish there was a more fancy way of putting that, but that's pretty direct.
Awesome. Andy, Carl had mentioned, and forgive me if I'm putting the wrong word in his, but the idea of he's signing mostly on referrals, getting somebody to say, hey, you got to check out so-and-so. How much of that is your strategy? And is there anything you would suggest to artists who are looking to you over the next few months that you would suggest them to do in order to get that to happen so that they get your consideration at free?
We've signed things that, friends I haven't spoken to in 5 years is like, hey, I listened to this in my car. I don't know what this band doesn't exist in real life here. We've done that, and we find things that are obviously or moving already and have buzz, and they're incredible live, or they're coming out of another deal. So it's all over the place. We don't look one way or another. I always tend to believe that if a song is out there and it's great, it's reacting, doesn't matter what genre lane it exactly sticks in, is that if it's unique and we like it, we're going to go after it. So obviously these things come from agents, they come from managers, they come from people on this chat right here, a lot of attorneys. So we're speaking to a whole group of people. We have a lot of people that work at the label that have their ear to the ground, that are also out there listening to music. We send people to shows. We have a very, very vast team of people across the United States, friends of promoters. We really try to keep on everything because, again, we're not trying to we're not, if it's special and it's in Central Florida and there's no people going, but we find it to be special, and we find that there to be a lot of talent, and we can work with it, and we know we can build it. I think that's another thing that we take a lot of pride on, whether it happens first record or second record or third record. It's like, that's part of developing. Everyone here on this chat knows what it's like to develop something from 0 to 100. And that's so it's fun and it's great. And sometimes you have to get down and dirty and find that thing and stick to it. Right. So, believing in the artist's vision, right. And being a good partner, because nothing happens overnight. And, the one thing I can say to artists right now, I think, time is weird right now because we're all sitting in our homes, but when time is flying by, 3 months to 6 months is so quick. Like, we don't even realize it sometimes. I'm always like, oh shit, it's been 4 months already. How? It flies by. So right now it's just it's a slog because we're all at home. working these insane hours on Zoom and the phone all day. And we're really trying to help our artists, like Carl mentioned, really give them tools to pivot and have things to do in this time. And a lot of it doesn't feel super intuitive. So it's like Menu mentioned here, leading a horse to water. It may not feel natural and may not feel brand appropriate for certain artists or in their space. But, you know, I think it's a slog, and time is slowed down. But we're going to blink, and it's going to be, you know, end of summer. And you know, the way I look at it, I'm really more optimistic probably than I should be, but I'm looking to the fall. I'm looking that, you know, that if baseball season can't come around and people can't go see baseball games, we won't have the runway to fall, because, you know, we're all looking to fall. We're saying our record's coming out, but we're looking at the bottleneck. We're like, okay, all the records come in the fall. Everything's going to Impact Radio in August. We're looking at all these things, but at the same time, you know, like, we need runway. We need, if there's a show on sale in August, people need to be confident buying a ticket in June, you know, so we need that time and we need that confidence. So, you know, my barometer has always been the 4th of July or baseball. If we can't get that switch turned on by then we have even more pivoting than we have to do right now. It's fluid, but my encouragement to people is like, it's a slog right now. Time is standing still. But it's, you know, if it was, if the circumstance was different, time would be flying by. So, you know,
I honestly, I think, you know, one of the things you just said, I spoke to a friend of mine who's an agent at CAA today, and he gave me some perspective, and it literally mirrors what you just said. Basically, he was like, music is not going to lead the way as far as when we're all back. He's like, but look, if they're playing baseball games and the NFL is back going, he's like, then we're back in clubs and we're back in arenas and things like that. And so yeah, I thought that made a lot of sense.
mm-hmm.
Mike, I got to give you the final word. Advice for unsigned artists and any takeaways from this conversation. I got to say just real quick, just thank you to all of you, because I think you guys fart these ideas out that just feel like so rudimentary to you, but I think to people who haven't had your kind of experience, everything that you're saying can be new and interesting to them. And I think sometimes you might not recognize that. So I want to thank you all for all those ideas. And Mike, anything that you're pulling out of this conversation that you're going to try to leverage, anything that you think other people listening should be leveraging?
Yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing is there's so many nuggets that have been put into play here. I've taken away a lot from each of these guys and their strategies. And, you know, really, I think Eric said something early on that's sticking in my head, which is, you know, we don't even know some of the stuff that's still going to change. And so, you know, my motto has always kind of been, you know, great content done consistently over time. I'm sticking to it. I've heard consistency is the name of the game here. So though there's a lot of, you know, great things that are coming out of this, you know, stay true to yourself, do it consistently. And, you know, Blasco said one thing, which is hone your craft. You know, now you got time. You're not in the rat race. You're not competing. You're not driving, you know, 100 miles an hour down the road trying to beat the next guy. You've got time to take 2 steps back in order to take 10 steps forward. So that's what I got. You're on mute, bud. Hey guys, I think Paul went on mute, so I think he's probably trying to say what an amazing
Yes, sorry, yeah.
panel we had here.
I was unmuting everybody but me. Yeah. Thank you all very, very much for taking part. It really was an amazing conversation. So thank you very, very much.